Hello and welcome to An Old Man Watches. And today I'm going to be talking about Shay, parts 1 and 2, because it was split into two parts, both which came out in 2008 and which were sometimes screened back to back as a single movie. And in Shay, we are looking at certain aspects of the life of Che Guevara, who was an Argentine Marxist who rose to fame as one of the leaders of the Cuban Revolution. And as I said, the film comes in two parts, subtitled The Argentinian and Guerrilla, which cover his involvement in first the Cuban Revolution and then the Bolivian Revolution. This review is going to contain spoilers about Che Guevara's life and death, so stop now if that's an issue for you, I guess. I'll give you a few seconds. But assuming you're still with me, part 1 begins in 1964, with Guevara being interviewed by an American journalist. His answers to her questions then lead us to a flashback almost a decade earlier, where Che first met Fidel Castro. That leads to the young Argentinian joining the Cuban Revolution, with the bulk of the first part of the film covering the events of that long struggle. These include Guevara's health difficulties. He suffered from asthma, his romance and eventual marriage with fellow revolutionary Elena March, and the climactic Battle of Santa Clara, where the revolution kicked out President Batista. The second part then begins in 1966, so about a decade after the events of most of the events of the first part, when a heavily disguised Guevara arrives in Bolivia as part of the Cuban government's efforts to establish a communist insurgency there. Guevara arrives full of hope for the success of this mission, but a number of errors by the revolutionary forces quickly put them on the back foot and under intense pressure from the Bolivian army. Despite ever more desperate efforts on his part to keep the struggle going, both the revolution and Guevara himself would in fact be dead within a year. As I said, spoilers for the life and death of Che Guevara. So in total, this is a 4-hour film, almost the entirety of which is in Spanish. That's going to be enough to put off some English-speaking audience members all by itself. For those of us who it's not a deal breaker, however, the question that has to be asked is, of course, is this film worth watching? And I think the answer is yes, but. And let's talk about why it's yes, but. So first of all, both parts of this film, especially the second, do a really good job of depicting the hardship and stresses of conducting a guerrilla war. You can really feel the sweat and the grime and the fear in many of the scenes, and it is in that respect really excellent work, really strong. Watching both parts back to back, as I did, also makes it easy to see the smart ways in which the film juxtaposes the two conflicts in which Guevara fought, or these two conflicts in which Guevara fought. He actually fought in others as well. It calls out both the similarities and the differences between the Cuban Revolution and the Bolivian insurrection. And I don't just mean that the first succeeded where the second did not. That's obviously a big one. So yeah, as a piece of filmmaking about the hardships of revolution, conflict, and the passion, the toughness needed to pursue it, this is really good work. Yeah, really compelling, powerful stuff. But as good as this film is in depicting the feel of the Cuban and Bolivian revolutions, I do feel it's less successful in other aspects. Particularly in the first part, which hops backwards and forwards in time on several occasions, it does not always provide the most clear and coherent narrative of events. If you come into this film with some background in the conflicts in question, or in Guevara's life in particular, you should be okay, but if you don't have that, if you come in without that, you may find it difficult to follow. You also from this movie won't get a deep understanding of the man himself, as despite being named for him, the film is not a detailed study of Che Guevara as an individual. Now, I'd read an 800-page biography, Che Guevara: A Revolutionary Life, shortly before sitting down to watch this film, so this wasn't a big deal for me personally. But as I was watching, I was thinking, like, if you are coming into this looking for a film that will give you plenty of context on Che as a man and a clear and straightforward account of his life and the wars in which he's fought, I'm not sure it's going to tick the boxes for you. It's a film that you probably would profit from, like, at least having read Che Guevara's Wikipedia page before you sit down to watch it. Perhaps in recognition of this issue, at least some home media releases of the film include a commentary track from John Lee Anderson, who wrote that 800-page biography I mentioned, and that would give you some really interesting insights. But watch the actual movie first, obviously. And finally, and this is more of I thought this was interesting. Che Guevara spent a significant part of his life fighting against what he perceived as imperialistic forces. Most famously, of course, in the Cuban Revolution against the US-backed military dictator Fulgencio Batista. But before that, he was involved in the Guatemalan social reforms of the early 1950s, reforms that were ended by a US-backed coup d'etat, which is in fact generally seen as the experience that solidified his political ideology and moved him to embracing armed revolution. He would also fight against the US-backed Mobutu regime in the Congo before his final struggle against the, say it with me now, US-backed regime there. So despite, or perhaps because of spending decades of his life opposing US power, Guevara has long been a subject of considerable interest in the popular culture of the United States. And when this film was initially seeking funding, there was considerable American money on the table. Money that vanished, by all accounts, the second the decision was made to film in Spanish rather than English. Even 40 years after its death, it seems that Che Guevara won't ever be on the same side as American money. So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit about the production of the film. I do agree with the director's decision to film this in Spanish. I think it makes for a more authentic experience, and you know what? You can read subtitles, people. It's not that hard. Do it for 5 minutes, you won't even notice you're doing it anymore. So that's Che Guevara. It's a good film, but it's not necessarily a film to go into to learn about the topic. It's more a film to, I guess, to provide a visual, oral view of a story that you already have some detail about. Next time, we test the theories that sequels are never as good as the original with 2004's Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed. Slight change of pace from Che Guevara, I think. Anyway, that'll be next time. In the meantime, thanks for watching this one, and I hope you enjoyed it.